Hi guys, let's continue on here with neurons, and now we're going to talk about myelin. Super important. Here's this wrapper of oligodendrocytes that are wrapping around this axon and insulating it and making sure that we don't lose a lot of ions there. And it's going to speed up that delivery of that current. So imagine this, they're very long, up to 1 meter long, and the speed of conduction is definitely based on that myelination. So if that myelination is there, the conduction is going to be increased dramatically. And it prevents the leak of these ions. And we say that it sort of jumps from, look here, from node of Ranvier to node of Ranvier, from here to here to here. It's not really a jump because what happens is it's depolarizing it in that one location, and this is close enough to be able to affect this other region. So I guess you could think of it as a jump, and that's called saltatory conduction. Saltatory, because to saltar is to jump, right? Saltar. Okay, this is really important. It's an alternative when you're building a human, right? If you had to build a human, it's an alternative to having larger diameter axons. Because if you had an axon that was way larger, then it could also do the same thing. It could send current more quickly, but that's not very practical because we would be full of these huge axons that would make us bigger. So an alternative to that is to just keep them small, but insulate them, myelinate them. This is a picture here of this node of Ranvier. So here's that depolarization. Sodium's going to come in. Those channels are open. The same old story again, right? And then it's going to shoot across, not needing to depolarize every single millimeter of the way, but it'll depolarize the next section and shoot and go, and then depolarize another section, then and shoot along. It makes it very fast. Now imagine MS, so multiple sclerosis. Your autoimmune disorder where you're attacking your own myelin and you're destroying some of that myelin. And in this picture here, it's dotted line because there's been a degeneration of that myelin. So what happens then is instead of sort of depolarizing here and rushing to the next area and then rushing to the next area, it has to continue to depolarize those channels that were sort of under the myelin, and it's slow. It's slow, and not only that, look at this arrow is strong all the way. This arrow is losing charge. It's losing power. It's becoming narrowed, which means it's a way that the artist here showed that, showing that not all of that current is getting to the other place. So what happens in MS? So an individual then won't be able to move a limb efficiently because those action potentials are actually not getting to the muscle to send that signal. Let's switch gears now to neurotransmitters. We've talked about you need a neurotransmitter from the presynaptic cell that's going to affect the postsynaptic cell, and then it too is going to depolarize. Well, there are many kinds of neurotransmitters. Acetylcholine is the one I've mentioned. So it's excitatory in the central nervous system and in the neuromuscular junction. So when you're thinking of a neuron arriving at a muscle and it's telling the muscle to contract, to run around the track, it's going to be acetylcholine. So that's one big mover of your body. What else? Many other neurotransmitters. I'm just going to hit on a few. Serotonin. So serotonin is a regulator of mood and behavior, of appetite. And so we want these to function normally, behaviorally. It affects the individual behaviorally. So a good example of this is Prozac. What does that do? It stops the reuptake. In other words, when it goes into the cleft, the synaptic cleft, it gets used and then it gets recycled and it gets removed from that synapse. Well, what if we left it in the synapse for longer? If we left it for longer, then it would be sort of a pleasant effect that, controls good appetite, good mood of this individual, and affects the behavior quite dramatically. So that's what Prozac does. It blocks the recycling of it, and it stays in that location for longer. Dopamine. Dopamine has lots of different functions. It too is sort of a feel-good neurotransmitter, but it also controls skeletal muscle movement. So an individual, all the smooth movement that we have in our body is because of the release of dopamine. A little bit more on that. So a Parkinson's patient, a patient who has low dopamine, is manufacturing very little dopamine in the brain, does have muscle control problems. One of the classic ones is initiation of movement. They feel stuck, so they can't move, and after a while they're able to do it, and then they kind of race because they're afraid of dropping over, balance is affected. So very important, dopamine. Noradrenaline, also called norepinephrine, and this one is both control of smooth muscle and cardiac muscle. So very important in fight or flight, right? Adrenaline, we always think of adrenaline as fight or flight, and noradrenaline too. So these are some examples of these different neurotransmitters, and tiny amounts of these neurotransmitters are having a huge effect on the body, and the lack of them, or the inability to manufacture them, or the reuptake that's too fast of them causes large problems in the body. Let's look at some other things that happen on neurons. Botulism, for example, that's a bacterial toxin. Look what it does. It prevents, so here it is, you could be contaminated by this one bacteria. And this bacteria prevents the release of acetylcholine. So it can actually block that release, and all of a sudden you are sort of frozen in your place, right? How does it do that? It inhibits the exocytosis of those vesicles in the presynaptic cell. So those vesicles are in the presynaptic cell. They're really ready to sort of be released when the action potential comes. Well, it blocks that. How does it block it? It digests. This is creepy, huh? It digests the proteins in those vesicles, kind of destroys that molecule. It's a destruction of the molecule. So does it make sense to you that it would cause flaccid paralysis, right? Because acetylcholine is going to send that message of go, contract that muscle, work that muscle. Instead, that muscle is not receiving that message. So flaccid paralysis. Some other interesting comments here. What's Botox? This is a neurotoxin. It's a neurotoxin. It's injected. It causes paralysis. It's used a lot for paralysis of tensed facial muscles. So here's, elimination of wrinkles. Someone's tense and those muscles remain contracted. Well, if only you could give a tiny little amount of something that would stop that contraction. So if you could stop a little bit of the release of the acetylcholine, then you wouldn't have that little contraction. You wouldn't have that little wrinkle. So that's what Botox is. It's actually a toxin that's stopping the release of acetylcholine. Super interesting. There's lots of other medical uses for Botox. It's not just that. It's used in severe underarm sweating that can actually stop that when this is overactive, and it sort of slows it down. A cervical dystonia, neurological disorder that causes neck and shoulder muscle contractions, and that is so tense that can actually lower it. Neck issues are huge in many individuals. Some individuals with uncontrollable blinking, blink, blink, blink. Here's this muscle firing all the time. Stop that firing of that muscle. Strabismus, chronic migraines has been tested on migraines with some success. And another one is overactive bladder. It can be sort of slowed down. So any time that you're sort of slowing down an excess of this acetylcholine, excess of this muscle contraction. So it has excellent other uses too. Let's talk about anesthetics. So you're blocking neurons. That's what we're talking about. Very interesting. If you can block an action potential, you're not going to feel something. So very excellent. Very different mechanisms. And this one example, lidocaine in the dentist. Here you are in the dentist chair. You really don't want to feel the drilling and all the stuff that's going on. So lidocaine, what it does is it binds to the site of the sodium channel. It puts itself there in the sodium channel instead of all the other stuff happening that should be happening there. It blocks the opening of that channel. So it's like it attaches as a molecule to it, and then all of a sudden it can't open. So there is no release of sodium. If there's no release of sodium, there's no transmission of that action potential. If there's no transmission of the action potential, you are happy in the dentist chair. No pain. Let's go back. Another neurotransmitter I wanted to give you a little reminder on is gamma aminobutyric acid, which is GABA. And this is used in our neuromuscular junctions, normally, to inhibit a muscle contraction. So we have this normally, right? We have GABA. GABA is going to inhibit some muscle contraction. Now you think of, why in the world would you want to inhibit something, right? Here you are sending a message to the muscle to act. Why would you want to stop it? Well, you do need to stop it, because if not, we would have too many muscles firing at the same time, like antagonistic muscles maybe that would fire simultaneously, and that would be very spastic. We don't want that. So it prevents spastic paralysis. You want one muscle to be smoothly contracting, and you want the other one to not be. You want it to be relaxing. So you're releasing that GABA, saying, okay, you hold off while the other one does its job. So that's GABA. It's one that's preventing a contraction in the muscle. So interesting. Tetanus, right? That shot that you take every 10 years. It prevents the release of GABA, not the vaccine, the actual toxin. So the toxin will not allow GABA to be released. So if GABA is not released, then what's going to happen? You're going to have this excessive spastic paralysis. So things that are tightening up too much in different directions, not flaccid like we spoke of before, but this time locked jaw, right? That's what you think of. With tetanus, where the jaw muscles just tighten up and that's it. Very hard to open the mouth. So it blocks the exocytosis of the GABA. The last one I want to mention is cocaine. It binds to reuptake transporters of some neurotransmitters like dopamine, and it lets dopamine be in that neuromuscular, in that junction between neurons, in that synapse for longer. So what happens? It overstimulates pathways. If you can't reabsorb and recycle some of these neurotransmitters, then their effect is enhanced. And that enhanced effect is what is going on with this illicit drug, cocaine. So if by blocking dopamine and serotonin reuptake, this feel-good is staying in that synapse for longer. Caffeine effects are very interesting, and you can look on, when I publish this, you can look at some of these. There's a TED lesson on it, but I don't really have time to go over all this, but certainly a drug that's used a lot today, caffeine. All right, guys, thanks. See you soon. Bye.